and welcome back to my small little library. Let's talk about all of the books I read in June, which were quite a few. I think I've read 16 books in June, which is really good. I really enjoyed a lot of them. I had a hard time finding books I wanted to finish, but when I found the right book, I actually had quite a lot of success in reading them, which is kind of nice. So yeah, let's talk about all 16 books I've read in June of 2023. And we are starting directly with an audiobook that is called The Dark Country by Dennis Etchison. That is the cover. It is a horror story collection. I gave it 3 stars. I wasn't that impressed, to be honest. There were a few really good stories, and then a lot of mediocre stories and a few really bad stories. Also, it was quite the brutal collection, which I'm also not the biggest fan of, and I didn't realize that by picking it up. So yeah, not technically the collection for me, which is why I gave it 3 stars. I think if you like really brutal horror and not necessarily need the psychological aspect, but just the brutality, go for it. I think then you might really enjoy that one. And then next, I read Secret Project number 2, or The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. Look at it. It is so pretty. I really love the look of the books. I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't really what I expected it to be, which was good and bad at the same time. It just went all different than what I thought Brandon Sanderson would write. And I think that is something, when you aren't really prepared for that, that is really weird. You don't expect it. And then it's just different than you would have thought. But I did like it in the end. I think it was a good story. I liked the concept of the story, that you have the main thing that happens to our main character, and then you have pages of the handbook that you can read. I like that concept. I always loved that. I wasn't the biggest fan of all of the characters. Some felt really stereotypical. But yeah, in the end, for me, the ending really did it. I had some scenes early on that I wasn't the biggest fan, but the ending really turned it around, which is why it got 4 stars, but barely. It broke my heart a little bit, because it just barely got 4 stars, but it got them, and I just love the look of the book. I love the illustrations inside. It's really pretty. So what can I say? I'm a sucker for pretty book. It's just, yeah, I cannot change that. The next one I've read was a non-fiction audiobook, which is called Naked Statues, Fat Gladiators, and War Elephants. The cover looks like this. It is by Garrett Ryan, and I gave it 4 stars. It was a really interesting audiobook. It is one of these questions and answers books, but it's a book that answers all of these weird questions you maybe would never ask someone working in a museum or something like that. For example, where did the Romans go to the toilet? And how was that? And what did the money look like? Or what did they wear underwear was the question, for example, in the book. And I really liked the scientific aspect of the book, because it really talks about all of the research and all of that. So it's not just a thought about answer, but it's really a researched answer. And yeah, there were really funny questions in there. There were some really interesting questions in there, and then there were some questions where I was yeah, I don't care for that, which is why I gave it 4 stars. But I did learn a lot of new things, which is really cool, and I really enjoyed it. That would have been something I would have loved while studying Egyptology, because I did some Greek courses for statues and stuff like that, which, I don't know, that thing would have been really interesting back then, to be honest. But yeah, I really enjoy audiobooks like that. Then we have the first 5-star for the month. That is Bloody Rose, the second book in the band series by Nicholas Eames. I absolutely loved this book. I laughed, I cried, I had all of the emotions. It was really hard-hitting for me. Maybe not for everyone, but for me it did hit really, really hard. I love the humor, I love the characters, I love the story. I really don't have much bad to say about the book. For me, this was all around a great book. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to part 3. I will be really, really, really sad when this is all over. But yeah, I mean, I can reread the series whenever I want. But yeah, the first one is The Kings of the Wild, and the second one is Bloody Rose. And yeah, our main character isn't Bloody Rose, it's Tem. And she joins the band of Bloody Rose, and then as a bard, and then she, yeah, chronicles what happens to them, and that is quite a lot, and I absolutely loved it. It's a great story. For me, that is like a perfect fantasy. You know, you have humor, you have really hard-hitting scenes, you can cry, you can laugh, you can take the book seriously, but it doesn't take itself too seriously. Big fan, I have to be honest. After that, I read another good book, which I was kind of surprised about, and that is The Dark Room by Jonathan Moore. This is a thriller, and we have a homicide investigator who's currently exhuming a body because the body is... Well, they think that it's connected to a crime, and whilst he's doing that, he gets a call that the mayor has someone who is blackmailing him, and yeah, he has to find out what is going on with both cases. Why are they now happening? What is going on, how is the mayor connected to it all, and yeah, who are the victims, and can they save the victims? That is the question in this book. I gave it 4 stars. I liked the story. It wasn't like the most intense thriller, you know, but I liked the characters. There were only like a few where I was like, was it really necessary? But other than that, a really cool, quick thriller. You know, sometimes books, in my opinion, can get way, way too long, and so I thought this one has the perfect length. It wasn't anything like groundbreaking, but it was really entertaining. Then I listened to another audiobook, but yeah, I have that one as a physical, so I will show it to you. So yeah, I listened to The Lord of the Rings Part 1, The Fellowship of the Rings by Andy Serkis, the audiobook. Obviously, The Lord of the Rings by J.R. Tolkien. I just love the Andy Serkis audiobooks, and these ones will always be 5 stars for me. I just love the books, and Andy Serkis just does a superb job with the audiobooks. I just love him, and yeah, I listened to this one, absolute blast. 5 stars from me for the book and the audiobook. Then I listened to How to Change Your Mind. I also have this one as a physical book, but I could never get through it in the physical form because, to be honest, I found it to be a little bit boring. So then I lent myself the audiobook from the library, and I absolutely loved the audiobook. So I gave the book 4 stars in the end. I think it's really interesting because it's not just like this book that is only like positive about drugs and stuff. He really tries to see the positive and the negatives and really look into the science behind it all. It was a touch too hippie for me, in a sense. Like, obviously spirituality is a big part of this. I don't think you can have it without spirituality, but for me there was a little bit too much of that in there. But yeah, there's a lot of science in here as well, a lot of interesting experiments, the whole history of drug research with LSD, and yeah, I absolutely loved it when it comes to that. But yeah, it is slightly dry for reading, you know, which is why I gave it 4 stars, because I could never read this physically. I think the audiobook is the way to go with that one, and yeah, I wouldn't read the physical version. Then we have another 4 star, which I'm just realizing I had a lot of like 4-star read this month, which is really, really nice. But yeah, that one is The Red Pyramid by Rick Riordan. This is the first book in the Kane Chronicles, and this is his Egyptian mythology book or series by Rick Riordan, and we have two siblings, a boy and a girl, who got separated after their mother died. The boy went to the father, the girl went to the grandparents. They never really understood why, and then one day their father does something really, really weird and bad for them, and the siblings have to fend for themselves, and they get help by some really interesting characters, which I'm not gonna spoil you. But yeah, I love this. 4 stars because, I don't know, I think I would have loved them even more as a child, and maybe then they would have been 5 stars, but I think they're obviously for like a younger audience. But yeah, I like the mythology in the book, I like the characters that you get to know, I like the gods that were included. I like how this isn't a copy of Percy Jackson, but really like a different version, because it is really, he's leaning heavily on the mythology and how this all worked in ancient Egypt, and obviously the gods and stuff were really different than the Greek ones. So yeah, I really, really like that. And you know, for example, in Percy Jackson we have the half-gods, because in Greek mythology that is obviously something that is a lot there. That doesn't exist in Egyptian mythology, which is why here our main characters are magicians, because those people existed back in Egypt. And so that just makes sense, and I really, really like that concept. So yeah, hopefully I will continue with the series soon, because I really like the first one. Then I read an ebook that is The Fighting Man of Mars, which is part 7 of the Martian series. I gave it 2 stars. It was just more of the same from the other books, but just even more boring and dumb and really hypocritical. The male main character, they just get worse and worse with every book, so I wouldn't recommend reading that. I'm currently reading through the whole series because I bought it. I like the first few, but to be honest, if you want to read something out of the series, read the first 3 and then just stop. It's just not worth it to continue, to be honest. Then we have an audiobook that I gave 5 stars to, and that is also a non-fiction audiobook called The Genome Odyssey. That is a book about, it is by a doctor who works in genome therapy and research, and it is pretty much just a book about these really horrible illnesses that come from DNA mutations, and what science did over the last decade to fix those things, and yeah, what is the current status of that. And there are a lot of like cases in there who agreed to be in the book, and it was really, really heartbreaking. I have to say that it's so hard to see what kind of illnesses are out there just because you have double of a gene you shouldn't have. It is incredibly hard to read, but I think it's a really important book to know, to really cherish, or like to really be grateful for what the for like what the doctors are doing for us and how much they are trying to make our lives better. Like, it was really impactful, the book. But I wouldn't recommend to read it if you are one who reads bad things about health and then feels really bad about that. My partner, for example, he had he was a hypochondriac for a time. Like, it was really, really bad for a long time, and he went to therapy for that. And he, for example, he couldn't read that book because he would just listen to his body and then think he would have illnesses that he doesn't have, which he knows he doesn't have them, but we all know how the brain ticks. But yeah, so please only read that if you are sure that you can handle the information. But in my opinion, it's a really, really worthwhile read. Then we have the worst book of the month, and that is The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes. I do not like this book. It is incredibly pretentious. Yeah, for me it came really close to The Catcher in the Rye, and I know that my opinion really isn't the majority in this. Like, I know that The Catcher in the Rye is a really loved book. This one as well, if you go after like the Goodreads ratings, but for me, this is just a book about a guy who gets treated really, really badly by a lot of people, and he just takes it, and he just feels bad. And it's so dumb because it's full of philosophical quotes, and yeah, he's just a punching bag for a lot of people, and he even feels bad about it, and they want to make that a positive thing. kind of. It's weird. I didn't like it. I wouldn't recommend reading it. But yeah, maybe if you like philosophical quotes, it has some merit for you. But for me, it's just a pretentious book that thinks it can deliver a message that is just, I don't know. It's one of those, you know, where there isn't really a plot, and in the end you're like, okay, so it's a plotless book, and the characters are really cookie cutter, and then someone else comes by and is like, no, that is the meaning, didn't you see that? And like interprets something into the book that isn't there. And so yeah, I gave it 1 star. I wouldn't recommend, but you know, a lot of other people liked it, so maybe you will like it. Then I read kind of like a joke book, but it was in the used book box I got on eBay. So I thought, you know what, why not read it? It really reminded myself of a book I had as a child, which was about raising dragons, and this one is called Raising Unicorns. And yeah, that is what it is. It is a guide about raising unicorns. So I gave it 3 stars. It's a children's book. It's obviously not meant for me. I don't know, I don't really want to say anything bad about it or anything good about it, because for me it's there, I read it. As a child I would have loved that book, but now that I'm an adult, I think it's just kind of like a joke book. And then I read a short story collection, and that is Alistair MacLean's The Lonely Sea. This one wasn't what I expected it to be, which is kind of... It was sad in a sense, because I didn't enjoy it as much as I hoped for. These are all short stories. When I say short stories, we have to kind of group them into 2 categories. We have the short fictional stories, and then we have short essays about real things that happened whilst World War II was around. And they are all connected to ships. So I really loved the first story, which is kind of like a horror boat story about children being swept out to sea and some people on a ship trying to save them. I really loved that one, and I had really high hopes after that. And then there come the World War II essay type of stories, which as far as I can see are actual essays. They aren't fictional stories. So yeah, I think it's a weird collection. I didn't enjoy the war retellings because it is something I just don't enjoy and I didn't expect to be in here. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars because it's obviously a me problem. And yeah, I loved some of the short stories. I didn't like some of the other short stories that were actual fictional stories. And I just won't rate the war stories because that's something I just don't enjoy. And I didn't know was in there. Then I would have probably not picked it up, to be honest, if I would have known they were in there. So yeah, wasn't the most interesting. And then I listened to The Lord of the Rings Part 2 because I got that audiobook. This is, I listened to the Andy Serkis version as well. 5 stars for the book, 5 stars for the audiobook. I don't really need to say anything else about that. And then the last 3 books I've read were all audiobooks. And the first one is The Storm is Up on Us, which is a book about the QAnon conspiracy theory group. I gave it 4 stars. The book really reminded me of those YouTube videos about conspiracy theories. So I really liked the flow of the book and how fast he told things and all of the different aspects, because he went into where do those theories come from, where they have their roots, where did QAnon start, and all of that. And it was a really interesting book. It really makes you think about why people believe such dumb stuff. So yeah, I think if you want to know more about the origins of QAnon and what it's all about, definitely pick that one up. The author is Mike Rothschild, and he isn't connected to the Rothschild family, but yeah, he makes it clear at the beginning because they are kind of involved in the current conspiracy theory as well. So yeah. And then the next one I've read was an H.G. Wells short story collection. That one sadly only got 2 stars. I knew quite a bit of the stories already from another short story collection of his. I know that it works that way, but I kind of hate it when they do short story collections from authors that only have books from one author and then they print different short stories multiple times in different books. I really dislike that. Yeah, there were some stories in there that I liked. The majority I just wasn't the biggest fan of. So this is why I gave it only 2 stars. I think that is more or less the worst rated HUS I've ever read, but I didn't like the collection. Like, there were a lot of stories where I was just like, meh, why is this in here? But yeah. It's called The Stolen Bacillus and Other Incidents. And yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, to be honest. I would just stick to the longer story format by H.G. Wells, to be honest. And then the last book I read, or listened to in this case, was Halloween Party by Agatha Christie. The first Agatha Christie book that I really enjoyed. But it still got 3.5 stars, because it wasn't quite 4 stars. But yeah, it's obviously a book about a Halloween party. It's a Hercule Poirot case, and we have a girl that turns up dead on a Halloween party, and then Poirot goes to the small village and investigates, and then stuff comes to light, which obviously he solves the case. But for me, that was the first case with like kind of realistic characters, and where Poirot wasn't like this real big asshole he's in all the other books, at least in my opinion. So yeah, I give it 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it. I will definitely still continue with them, try to find the ones I really like, and just ignore the other ones, you know. But yeah, those are all of the books I've read in June. Obviously I listened to a lot, which really helped me read more books. But yeah, I was really in the mood for non-fiction audiobooks, and I found a few really good ones, which is really, really nice, to be honest. So yeah, maybe comment down below what books you finished, or if you have read any of those books, how did you like them? Maybe leave a like, subscribe, that would really, really mean a lot to me. And hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!